if you've ever experienced what just happened, you'll know exactly how scary a simple sneeze can be. Now, with sciatica, some people even become nervous about laughing, let alone sneezing, because anytime they do, they get that sharp zap of pain in their back or leg and they feel like their back went out. Now, it can be so sudden that you freeze for a moment. Some people describe it as an electric shock. Others call it a lightning bolt, and many tell me that that intensity is what scares them the most. Now, if that sounds familiar, what you're experiencing isn't random, it's a pattern. This is a really common pattern, and the most important thing to understand is that the sneeze itself is usually not the cause of the problem. The sneeze is simply the trigger. In other words, the sneeze didn't create the entire issue, it just exposed the sensitivity that was already there. One of the reasons this happens is because coughing and sneezing and laughing and straining, they all create this sudden pressure that contracts and presses in through the trunk and abdomen. That pressure is then transmitted through to the low back and pelvis and surrounding structures that pushes blood into the veins around where those nerves are, around the deepest part of your spine. And that reduces that space for those nerves to move freely. For most people, that's not a problem. We're designed like that. But if the sciatic nerve pathway is already irritated or sensitive or compromised, that sudden increase in pressure can light that system up and create a sharp, shooting pain that people often describe. This is where I think the most important thing is to provide some reassurance. That feeling is very unpleasant and it can be quite frightening, but it doesn't mean that you've caused damage. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes people assume is that that sudden, awful pain must be catastrophic. But more often what we're seeing is that nerve was already sensitive and that sneeze has simply revealed that sensitivity. Now, I often explain it to patients this way. The sneeze did not build up that pattern, it revealed it. Just like we've discussed in previous videos about sitting, driving, walking, and bending. The body's been giving clues long before this flare-up, and you may have already noticed them with some few niggles here and there. But it's that one sneeze that suddenly exposes what was already brewing beneath the surface. Now, if this happens occasionally, the first thing I'd suggest is not panicking. One isolated episode doesn't automatically mean that something serious is happening. It's also generally not helpful to immediately then start repeatedly testing those symptoms with coughing and sneezing and the like. A lot of people will sneeze, they get that sharp pain, and then they spend the next 10 minutes, they bend, they twist, they stretch, they try to work out whether they've damaged themselves. And quite often, that's just simply irritating things even more. So if you feel a sneeze coming on, it can sometimes help to brace gently, just gently, rather than fully tensing violently. Now, if you're standing, keep your feet grounded and if possible, avoid twisting or bending at the same time that you're coughing or sneezing. If you're lying down, try not to curl up or rotate sharply as that sneeze occurs. These aren't magic fixes, but they may help reduce that irritation during a flare-up. It's also worth paying attention to the pattern itself. It's something that happened once 6 months ago, or is it something that's happening every day? Is it happening more frequently? Is it traveling further down the leg? Is there been any changes to numbness or weakness? Those details matter because they help us understand whether that nerve pathway is becoming more sensitive over time or it's improving. Now, let's talk about what this symptom does not automatically mean. A sneeze with shooting pain down your leg doesn't mean you've done permanent damage. It also doesn't mean that you need surgery, and it certainly doesn't mean that your spine's ruined. However, it's not something that should simply be ignored, and if it keeps happening or becomes more frequent, particularly if it's accompanied with things like numbness or weakness or loss of function, we need to act as soon as possible. As a brief safety note, if you've ever experienced this severe pain that worsens into weakness or loss of bowel bladder control or numbness in between your legs, we've got to get onto those situations as soon as possible. Okay, so go get assessed. One of the reasons that this pattern is so useful clinically is because it gives us another piece of the puzzle. If coughing or sneezing sends pain into your leg, that tells us that there's something going on when the pressure changes. When we combine this with everything else we know, if sitting burns, if driving tinglies, all those sorts of things, we can use these details together to really figure out exactly what's going on rather than just relying on a single symptom. That's why I'll often remind my patients that the symptom tells us where it goes, but there's behavior that tells us what sets it off. Sneezing is useful because the information shows us how that nerve responds to those pressure changes. The goal at this stage is not to be scared of sneezing, it's actually to understand why the body reacts this way. And at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to live in fear with coughing, sneezing, laughing, or moving normally. If pressure changes keep setting off that leg pain, The bigger question is, why is this nerve pathway so sensitive to react that way in the first place? And this is exactly what a sciatica assessment is designed to help answer. At Aligned Chiro, we want to assess factors such as posture, spinal movement, nerve function, and symptom behavior. We want to understand not only where you're feeling the symptoms, but why they're happening. And if we need, we're clinically indicated, we can also get some imaging done, such as X-rays or MRI, to help build a clearer picture of what's going on. The goal isn't simply to avoid sneezing. The goal is to understand what's irritating that nerve to determine the most appropriate next step. So if sneezing, coughing, or even laughing sends pain down your leg, don't keep guessing. If you'd like to learn more, I'm going to be running a webinar pretty soon on doing a deeper dive into the causes of sciatica, why symptoms respond the way they do, and the different approaches available to help people recover. And if you'd like answers sooner, book a sciatica assessment at Aligned Chiro. We'll assess your posture, your movement, your function, any of that symptom behavior, so we can better understand what's irritating that nerve and what the next step should be. You don't have to spend the rest of your life bracing for every sneeze, so let's find some answers.